For 7-year-old Max, lunchtime was always the same. A peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, and a little note from Mom that said, "I love you. Be brave today." For his mother, Anna, it was a small act of love in a busy life filled with work, bills, and exhaustion. She never imagined something so simple would draw attention. Until one ordinary Wednesday, Max came home with a folded note in his backpack. The alarm buzzed at 5:45 a.m., slicing through the thick silence of the apartment like a warning bell. Anna groaned quietly and reached out, silencing it before it could wake Max, still asleep in the next room. The single-pane windows rattled gently in the early morning wind, a reminder that winter was creeping in faster than she'd budgeted for. She rubbed her eyes and sat on the edge of the bed, her body aching in that dull, familiar way it always did. An ache that came not from injury or illness, but from life pressing in too hard for too long. The apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms, a living room barely big enough for a second-hand couch, and a kitchen where the tiles were cracked and the refrigerator hummed louder than necessary. But it was theirs. She paid the rent on time. She kept it clean, and most importantly, it was a space where Max felt safe. In the kitchen, Anna turned on the weak overhead light and shuffled to the counter, where she'd already laid out what she'd need the night before. 2 slices of wheat bread, peanut butter, a small bag of apple slices from a multi-pack she'd picked up on sale at the discount grocery. She worked quickly, spreading the peanut butter with care, trimming the crusts just the way Max liked it. She wrapped the sandwich in wax paper, not because she had to, but because it made it feel more thoughtful, more personal somehow. She reached for the pad of sticky notes beside the toaster. She kept it there, along with a purple pen whose ink was starting to run dry. The notes were part of the ritual now. She'd started writing them when Max was in kindergarten, just a little encouragement, a doodle of a dinosaur, or a simple reminder that she loved him. What began as a novelty had become sacred. Today's note was simple. "I love you, Max. Be brave today. You've got this." She folded it carefully and tucked it inside the brown paper bag next to the apple slices. Some mornings, when things weren't so rushed, she'd add a small treat. A half cookie or a few chocolate chips in a tiny plastic bag. But this week, the cupboards were low, and payday wasn't until Friday. Still, she knew Max wouldn't complain. He never did. He was 7, and already too wise for his years, somehow knowing not to ask for things she couldn't give. As she packed the lunch bag into his backpack, she glanced at the clock. 6:12 a.m. Max would need to be up in 10 minutes if they were going to catch the early bus. Anna didn't own a car anymore. It had broken down last winter, and repairs were out of reach. The bus meant an earlier start, but it was reliable. It got her to work and Max to school, and that was enough. She moved through the motions like choreography, starting the coffee, laying out Max's clothes, brushing her own teeth while scanning emails from her manager. She worked front desk at a medical billing office, low pay, high stress, but decent hours and a kind boss. She had dreams once of finishing college, maybe becoming a nurse. But life had shifted course when Max came along. His father had left before the baby was born. At first, she thought he'd come back. Then she stopped hoping. A soft sound broke her thoughts, the creak of Max's bedroom door. He padded out in footy pajamas, rubbing his eyes, hair a soft, messy halo. She knelt down to meet him, pulling him into a hug. He smelled like sleep and shampoo and something uniquely Max. "Morning, baby," she said gently. "Morning, Mama," he mumbled. "You want breakfast?" He shook his head. He never ate much in the morning, just a sip of juice or a bite of toast if she insisted. Still, she made toast anyway, setting it on the table beside his favorite cup filled with watered-down apple juice. As Max got dressed, she pulled on her own uniform, navy slacks, a blouse that had seen better days, and a cardigan with one missing button. She applied a touch of mascara in the hallway mirror, wiping a smudge off her cheek. It wasn't glamorous, but she didn't care. Her concern wasn't looking sharp, it was getting Max out the door with everything he needed for the day. By 6:50, they were bundled up and headed for the bus stop. Max carried his backpack, slung low on his back, and Anna walked beside him with one eye on the time. They waited in the cold together, watching cars stream by in the early light. He looked up at her suddenly. "Did you put a note in my lunch?" She smiled, bending down to zip up his coat more snugly. "Of course I did. You didn't think I'd forget, did you?" He grinned, a small, gap-toothed smile that made something warm bloom in her chest. "Good. I like reading them after math. It makes the day better." She kissed his forehead. The bus pulled up. As he climbed aboard, he turned to wave through the window. She waved back, heart swelling in that painful, tender way only a parent could know. Then the bus was gone. Anna stood in the cold, clutching her coffee cup, feeling the wind bite through her coat. She thought of the peanut butter sandwich, the apple slices, and the little note tucked away in the lunch bag. It wasn't much, but it was hers to give, and she gave it with all she had. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was how that tiny gesture, repeated each day, would ripple outward beyond her son's desk. That a few words scribbled in fading purple ink would soon be read by someone else, and that they would change everything. Certainly. Here's a long-form expansion of Chapter 2, continuing the story in detail and without a heading. The lunchroom at Brookside Elementary buzzed with the kind of organized chaos only elementary schools could master. At exactly 11:35 a.m., the second graders spilled in, some in pairs, others in excited little packs, chattering about spelling tests, playground rules, and whose turn it was to sit closest to the window. The room smelled faintly of tomato sauce, milk cartons, and disinfectant, with the echo of laughter and the screech of moving chairs bouncing off tiled floors. Mrs. Elena Alvarez sat at the back of the cafeteria near the teacher's table, half watching the kids while nibbling at the salad she'd packed that morning. It had been a long week already, though it was only Wednesday. Parent-teacher conferences were coming up, and she still hadn't finished inputting all the grades into the system. Her mind swirled with deadlines and behavioral notes, but as always, her eyes kept drifting toward her students, especially the ones who didn't know they were being watched. That was when she noticed him again. Maximum. He entered the cafeteria quietly, as he always did, a little less energetic than the other boys in his class. He didn't rush to grab a spot or argue over who got to sit where. He moved deliberately, lunch bag in hand, and chose a table near the far side of the room, one not quite isolated, but definitely less crowded. A few other students joined him eventually, but they didn't talk much. Max seemed content to be quiet. What caught Mrs. Alvarez's attention, however, wasn't his silence. It was what he did every day, without fail. He would reach into his brown paper bag, unwrap his sandwich with careful precision, and then, before taking a single bite, he would pull out a small piece of paper and unfold it like it was something sacred. He read it slowly, lips moving slightly as he traced the words with his eyes. Then he'd smile. A real, full smile. Not the kind children faked when they knew a teacher was watching. Sometimes, after reading it, he'd show the note to another student. Usually it was Ava, a quiet girl with tangled curls who often forgot her lunch, or Jamal, who'd recently moved in with his grandmother and rarely had more than a small carton of milk on his tray. Max would slide the note across the table, and they'd all read it together, then fold it back up and pass it around like a treasure. Mrs. Alvarez noticed this routine more than once. It happened almost daily. Max, his sandwich, and the note that made him sit up straighter. He wasn't the only child who brought lunch from home, but he was the only one who treated a piece of paper like it mattered more than the food itself. She began to pay closer attention. There was something about Max that tugged at her. He was a good student, polite, attentive, quick to help clean up even when it wasn't his mess. But he didn't speak much in class unless called on, and he almost never talked about home. When the class wrote essays about their families, Max's were always vague, more about feelings than facts. He never mentioned a dad, and only once referred to his mom, writing, "She works hard and still makes time for me. I think she's tired, but she always smiles when I get off the bus." Mrs. Alvarez had kept that line in the back of her mind. It wasn't her job to pry, but teachers develop instincts, honed over years of hallway whispers and quiet tears during recess. And something about Max's lunches, the precision of their sameness, and the small handwritten notes made her heart ache. She started walking by his table during lunch, pretending to check on everyone, but really hoping to hear snippets of what those notes said. Most days they were sweet and simple. "You're brave, Max. I'm so proud of you. Keep going. You are stronger than you know. Smile today. Someone needs it." It was never anything grand or elaborate, but it was consistent, and it was deeply human. One day, Ava leaned over the note and whispered, "I wish my mom did that." Max didn't say anything at first. He just smiled at her and slid half his sandwich across the table. Mrs. Alvarez turned away, blinking more than necessary. That night, long after the final bell had rung and the building had emptied, she sat alone at her desk, grading spelling tests under fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. She kept thinking about Max, about his notes, about how his tiny ritual was becoming something much bigger than a lunch routine. It was becoming a quiet form of leadership, of care, of emotional literacy most adults hadn't mastered. She wondered if his mother knew. She probably didn't. Parents often assumed no one noticed the small things, the carefully packed lunches, the extra pair of mittens sent in just in case, the notes that seemed like a whisper into the void. But Mrs. Alvarez had learned long ago, kids don't hide the love they're given. They carry it around with them. They share it in small, beautiful ways. She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. The room was silent now, except for the hum of the heater kicking on and the distant scrape of a janitor's broom down the hallway. She stared at the stack of graded papers, but couldn't concentrate anymore. Instead, she reached for a piece of school stationery and began to write. It was just a few sentences, honest, warm, and from the heart. She didn't know if it would be too much, if it would embarrass the boy or seem intrusive, but she had to say it. She had to let his mother know that someone had noticed, that someone saw the love, not just in the sandwich or the apple slices, but in the steady rhythm of her effort, in the way Max walked through the day with something in his pocket that told him he mattered. She folded the note carefully and tucked it into a plain envelope. Tomorrow she would slip it into Max's backpack, quiet and unseen, just like the messages he carried every day. Certainly. Here's a fully expanded version of Chapter 3, written in long form without a heading. The envelope wasn't anything special. No logo, no color, not even a stamp. Just a plain white rectangle folded into the side pocket of Max's backpack, nestled between a wrinkled worksheet and a tiny, half-empty bottle of hand sanitizer shaped like a dinosaur. When Anna unpacked his things later that evening, as she did every night while Max unwound with his cartoons, she almost missed it. She was halfway through pulling out a permission slip and shaking crumbs from the bottom of the lunch bag when she noticed the edge of the envelope peeking out. "Max?" she called softly from the kitchen, not wanting to pull him too far from his bubble of after-school comfort. "Did you get a note or something from your teacher today?" He looked up from the floor, where he was lying on his stomach, chin in his hands, watching animated squirrels try to escape a vacuum cleaner. "I think so. She put something in my bag." Anna wiped her hands on a dish towel and sat at the small kitchen table. The envelope wasn't sealed, just folded over. Her name was written on the front in looping, tidy script, Anna Thompson. Her stomach tightened, the way it always did when she saw her name written formally by a teacher. Had something happened? Did Max say something strange in class? Was there a forgotten form? Had she overlooked a parent-teacher meeting? She unfolded the paper and began to read. Dear Miss Thompson, I hope it's all right that I'm writing to you. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you, truly thank you, for the incredible example of love and consistency you send with Max each day. I've noticed the notes you tuck into his lunch. I've watched him read them, smile, and then share them, not just the words but the spirit behind them, with other children at his table. Some of those students don't bring lunch, some don't get notes, some are missing something else entirely. What you're doing, even if it seems small, is not small at all. You are building something in him: kindness, empathy, confidence, and without even knowing it, he's passing it along to others. In a world that's moving too fast, and in a time when so many children are struggling quietly, your simple, steady act of love is making a difference. Not just in Max's life, in our classroom, and in ways you may never fully see. I wanted you to know that. Warmly, Mrs. Elena Alvarez. By the end of the letter, Anna's hands were shaking. Tears welled up fast, catching her off guard. She blinked hard, but they came anyway. Not from sadness, not even really from joy, but from something deeper. A release. A sudden undoing of the tightness she didn't know she'd been carrying in her chest. The letter slid from her fingers and landed softly on the table. Max was still watching cartoons, blissfully unaware that he had just handed his mother the most meaningful acknowledgement she'd received in years. She stared at the wall for a long moment, taking in the quiet hum of the apartment, the radiator clinking in the corner, the distant chatter from the TV, the familiar drip of the leaky faucet in the bathroom she hadn't gotten around to fixing. She had spent so many years doing what needed to be done, not for praise, not for attention. She wasn't the kind of person who expected thank yous or applause. She got up early, packed lunches, worked full days, paid what bills she could, and negotiated with the ones she couldn't. And when Max came home, she smiled and listened and gave everything she had left, even if what she had left wasn't much. But no one saw that. Or at least, she thought no one did. That letter said otherwise. It told her in quiet, thoughtful words that her efforts weren't invisible, that her love, though packaged in something as simple as a sticky note and a peanut butter sandwich, was echoing far beyond her kitchen table. She read it again, slowly, letting every word settle into the cracks inside her, the ones that had formed from years of stretching herself thin, of wondering if she was doing enough. Her mind wandered back to the first time she'd put a note in Max's lunchbox. He had just started kindergarten, small and nervous and so painfully quiet on the first day that he didn't say a word during breakfast. She had scrawled a quick message on the back of a receipt and slipped it into his bag. I love you. You're going to do great today. When he got home, he didn't say much, but he hugged her longer than usual. The next day, he asked if there would be another note. And so it began. She didn't expect them to matter this much. She hadn't known they were being read by more than just her son. Suddenly, she felt both incredibly proud and deeply humbled. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a quiet voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was doing something right. She folded the letter carefully and pressed it between the pages of a cookbook that hadn't been opened in months. She'd find a proper place for it later. For now, she just needed to sit still. Max wandered into the kitchen a few minutes later, rubbing his eyes and clutching a stuffed bear that had seen better days. Mom? Yeah, sweetheart? He climbed into her lap without asking, curling into her like he used to when he was smaller. Mrs. Alvarez said your notes are really nice, he murmured. Anna kissed the top of his head. She wrote me a letter. I know, he said. She said you should keep writing them forever. Anna held him tighter. In that moment, her exhaustion melted just a little. The worry about bills, the noise of the outside world, the endless pressure to be everything all the time, it quieted. She would keep writing the notes, of course she would. Because now she knew They weren't just for Max. They were part of something bigger, something quietly beautiful, something that mattered, certainly. Here's a fully expanded version of Chapter 4, continuing the story in rich detail and without a heading. The next morning, Anna stood at the kitchen counter with the same 2 slices of wheat bread, the same half-used jar of peanut butter, and the same dull kitchen light, casting soft shadows across the counter. But something was different. She wasn't just tired. She wasn't just going through the motions. There was something else moving through her, a quiet energy, like the flicker of a candle in a dark room. It wasn't big or loud, but it was there, a sense of purpose, of meaning. She opened the sticky notepad and paused. Normally, the words flowed quickly, a line of encouragement, something gentle to hold on to during the long school hours. But today, the weight of Mrs. Alvarez's letter still sat with her, like a warm hand on her shoulder. She picked up the pen. You make the world kinder just by being in it. Share your smile today. She paused again. Then, on a second sticky note, she wrote, You are not alone. You matter. You are seen. She placed one note in Max's lunch bag, right beside the sandwich. Then she placed the second one in a small zippered pouch and tucked an extra sandwich inside a separate paper bag. That second lunch was for someone else. She wasn't sure who yet, but she had a feeling Max would know. When he wandered into the kitchen, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, she crouched down in front of him and held out the second bag. Hey, buddy, she said. I made a little extra today, in case someone else doesn't have a lunch. Max blinked up at her, surprised, then nodded slowly. Okay. You can decide who gets it. If no one needs it today, bring it back and we'll try again tomorrow. He smiled, one of those slow, thoughtful smiles that made him look older than 7. Ava never has lunch. Anna nodded. Then maybe Ava. He took both bags carefully, as if they were delicate, important things, and in a way, they were. At school, the routine unfolded as it always did. Max sat at the usual table with Ava and Jamal, unwrapped his sandwich, and unfolded his note. But this time, instead of sliding it across the table, he reached into his backpack and placed the second bag in front of Ava. What's that? She asked, wide-eyed. It's for you, Max said. My mom made it. Ava looked at the bag like it was too good to be true. Then she peeked inside, eyes lighting up as she saw the sandwich and the folded, sticky note. She read it aloud, softly. You are not alone. You matter. You are seen. Her face changed. Not dramatically, but in the way a face does when it hears something it didn't know it needed. Jamal leaned closer, reading over her shoulder, his expression quiet. Mrs. Alvarez, who was doing her usual loop around the lunchroom, noticed the exchange. She didn't interrupt. She just stood still for a moment and watched the way the 3 children leaned in close to one another. Quiet, connected by something invisible, but real. That afternoon, she sent a quick message to the school counselor. Subject: lunch table notes. Message: There's something really special happening in the cafeteria. I think we should talk. Anna continued packing the extra lunch every day that week. She never asked Max what happened to it, though he occasionally mentioned that someone new got it that day, or that Ava had started saving her notes in a shoebox at home. By Friday, Max was helping her pick the quotes. They sat together at the kitchen table before bed, flipping through library books and jotting down sentences they liked. I want the notes to feel like sunshine, Max said one night, after choosing a line from a poem. Anna smiled. Me too. The following Monday, Mrs. Alvarez approached Anna at pickup, waving shyly from the curb. I hope you don't mind me saying this in person, she began, but the lunch notes, you're creating something bigger than you know. Anna blushed. I wasn't sure it was doing anything, I just wanted Max to feel loved during the day. I didn't think it would matter to anyone else. Mrs. Alvarez's voice softened. It's starting to spread. Ava told her grandmother. Jamal's foster mom called to ask if she could write notes too. And now 3 other students are bringing extras to share. Anna felt her throat tighten. Mrs. Alvarez continued, We were thinking, what if we started a small project? Something for the whole school. We could call it the Lunch Notes Project. We'd invite families to write kind messages for any child to read. We could set up a little board in the cafeteria. Kids could take one, leave one, maybe even write their own. Anna blinked, stunned. That sounds beautiful. It started with your notes, the teacher said, and your love. The project rolled out 2 weeks later. A bulletin board decorated with construction paper hearts and bright yellow sunbursts went up near the entrance to the cafeteria. A small basket labeled, Take What You Need, held folded notes with handwritten messages. You are brave. You can get through hard things. Someone believes in you. Children lined up to read them. Some took them silently and folded them into their pockets. Others passed them around, and more than a few left their own notes behind. Teachers began including notes in classroom activities. Counselors used them during one-on-one sessions. Parents started slipping extras into backpacks, many with names they'd never heard but hoped would feel a little less alone that day. And every day, without fail, Anna and Max sat at the kitchen table and wrote one more. Because now they both understood. Something so small, done with love, could become something big. Not flashy, not loud, but something real. Something that would keep growing. And it had all started with a sandwich, and a note, and a boy who believed his mother's words could make the world softer. He was right, of course. Here is an expanded version of Chapter 5, written in long form and without a heading. The cafeteria buzzed like a beehive at lunchtime, but there was something different about the hum these days. It had changed, softened. It wasn't quieter exactly, but warmer somehow. Instead of the clatter of trays and the scrape of chairs echoing against cinder-block walls, there were soft bursts of laughter, quiet conversations, and something even rarer in a school cafeteria: tenderness. The bulletin board near the lunch line had grown since it first appeared. It now stretched halfway across the wall, a collage of crayon-colored hearts, cheerful clouds, and messages scrawled in all sorts of handwriting, adult and child alike. Notes were pinned, taped, even tucked into tiny envelopes made from construction paper. Some were carefully printed. Others were scribbled in crooked letters with backward E's and too many exclamation marks. You're not alone. You're somebody's favorite person. Even when it's hard, you're doing great. One reads simply, Your smile made my day. Max passed the board every day now without needing to read it. He knew what it said, even if the words changed. He knew what it meant. Some of the notes had even come from him, not just the ones his mom helped him write at night, but ones he'd written on his own. Ones that came from somewhere deeper, the kind of words he wished someone had told him before the notes had started. His class now called their table the Kindness Corner, and students who didn't have a seat elsewhere often found their way there. No one was turned away. Some came for the food Max and others shared, but more stayed for the feeling. Max didn't talk about it much. He didn't brag or explain. He just offered half a sandwich, or pointed to the board, or handed someone a note without a word. He had learned that sometimes you don't need to say much. Sometimes, the quietest acts say the most. One morning, a letter arrived at Anna's apartment. This time, it wasn't hand-delivered or slipped into a backpack. It was from the school principal, typed on letterhead, and sealed in a proper envelope. For a moment, her stomach dropped. Old habits. But as she opened it and read, her face softened. The school wanted to recognize her. At the next PTA meeting, they planned to highlight the Lunch Notes project and share how it began. They hoped she would attend, and maybe even speak. Anna stared at the letter for a long time. She didn't see herself as someone who spoke at meetings. She didn't like being the center of attention. She wasn't a leader. She was a mom. Just a mom. Doing what she could to help her kid get through the day. But maybe that was enough. Maybe that was more than enough. The meeting was held in the school library, rearranged with folding chairs and coffee urns. Teachers, parents, and staff gathered, chatting quietly under the soft, fluorescent lights. Mrs. Alvarez stood near the front, giving Anna an encouraging smile as she walked in. Max came too, clinging shyly to her side. When they were introduced, Anna felt her throat tighten, just like it had the first time she'd read Mrs. Alvarez's note. She stepped up to the front slowly, her heart pounding in her ears, and looked out at the small crowd. Most were strangers. Some she recognized from drop-offs and pickups. A few nodded, warm and open. "I don't have a speech," she said finally, voice trembling but steady. "I just have a lunch bag and some notes." She held up a brown paper bag, one of the kind she packed every morning. Inside was a sandwich, a sticky note, and a smiley face drawn with a purple pen. "I started writing these notes because I wanted Max to feel less alone during the day. I never planned for anyone else to see them. I didn't think they mattered much, to be honest. I just hoped they'd help my son feel strong enough to get through math class." There were a few soft chuckles. But I guess, when you put love into something, even something small, it can grow. People can feel it, and then they start to share it. She looked over at Max, who was trying to hide behind the leg of her chair. "I didn't do anything big," she said, "but my son did. And so did your kids, and your teachers. And maybe that's what kindness is. It doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be real." The room was quiet for a long moment. Then someone began to clap, hesitant at first, then steady. And soon, the library was filled with applause. Anna blushed and stepped back. Max took her hand, squeezing it tightly. After the meeting, several parents came to thank her. A father mentioned how his daughter had started writing notes to herself each morning. A mother said her son had taped one to his wall at home. A teacher shared that a student who had struggled with bullying had started leaving anonymous notes in lockers. The project had become something alive, a thread running through the school, stitching people together one sentence at a time. The next week, the school counselor organized a kindness week. Students were invited to write notes during recess, and teachers read one aloud each morning over the loudspeaker. Some were funny, some were deeply moving. One simply said, "Today is a good day to try again." Anna didn't speak at any more meetings. She didn't need to. The project had taken on a life of its own, but she kept writing notes for Max every morning with the same purple pen. Not because she had to, but because it was who she was now. And every time Max handed one to a classmate, or slipped it into the note basket, or quietly read it to himself before unwrapping his sandwich, she knew. She had made something that would last. Not a viral story, not a headline, but a ripple. A ripple of love moving outward, from a kitchen table to a cafeteria to a classroom and far beyond. One note at a time,